She was working for a guy named Mike Mills who had partnered with Melissa Rivers to make a play, a sort of touring entertainment about her mom. And so she thought I would be someone to pitch it. I was actually working in Australia at the time, so I stayed up till like 3 in the morning so I could have this meeting, depending on the timing worked. That was right before the pandemic started, and yeah, I pitched this whole idea about Joan at one point did a play about her life that she starred in. She did it at Edinburgh Fringe, and then she did it again at the Geffen Theater in Los Angeles, and it was honestly very bad. She was, Joan, but like it was sort of like kind of a play, but mostly she was just doing her own shtick, So and she couldn't figure out why no one liked it, and so I sort of pitched to her a play about that play, where you would see them in rehearsal for that play, but then they would sort of pop out of that and people would come different characters, and it was a really exciting pitch, but when I got hired to write that, I then had to do it, and it was an actual nightmare. Like I was trying to sort of do the math of how that would happen and how people would exist in this space, and they really only wanted 4 people in the play, and it just wasn't enough. And I went to them and I said, I sold you something that I don't think is a good idea. I'd like to do something else. So then I really reframed it and focused it on Melissa, which and her experience of trying to figure out who her mom was. And that's how this version of it came up.
And how aware were you of Joan, or what was your experience of Joan before you were asked to do this?
Oh, I've known about Joan since I was a little kid. I grew up in Larchmont.
Oh.
So everyone knows, if you're from Larchmont, you know who Joan Rivers is, you know who Matt Dillon is, you know who Michael O'Keefe is, and that's about it. Apparently Matt Dillon was discovered cutting class and having a hot dog at Walter's hot dog stand across the street from our high school when he was discovered for The Outsiders movie.
We can add you to
or maybe Rumblefish, I don't know which one it was. Anyway, Dan Futterman too, the actor and director. So I knew who Joan Rivers was. I had seen her I would watch The Tonight Show like a precocious kid, and she did a benefit concert at my high school. So I saw her do stand-up in my high school auditorium where I got to do How to Succeed in Business without really trying.
Who did you play?
Frump, duh, come on, that's the part. That's who you want to play. You would have been a good Frump too.
Never did.
I wore these, they gave me these prop glasses to wear, but they had really thick prescription lenses in them. But I kept it because it made my eyes really huge, but I couldn't see a thing. I was just wandering around the stage. Anyway, that's a digression. I knew she was. I had met her once when my then fiance and I were going to see a play that our friend Julie Halson was in that Charles Bush had written, and Joan was very close with Charles. And it happened to be the same night that Joan was there. So we all went across the street to this Italian restaurant across from the theater down in the East Village, and Julie and Melissa and I were sitting at one table, and my wife Melissa, and Joan and Charles and their gaggle was at another table. So Julie took us across and it got to introduce us, and she said, "This is my friend Danny, and this is his fiancée Melissa." And she looked at my wife without saying a word to me and just goes, "Where's the ring?" So she goes, "Where'd you get it from?" And I was like, "Well, it's Kwiat and blah, blah, blah." And I went and picked it up. She goes, "You did good." And that was my whole interaction with Joan. That's all I know.
So, she had such an enormous life, which we're going to talk about, but how do you even start beginning to formulate how you're going to put together a play with, how did you arrive at the format that you ended up with?
I didn't. I mean, I don't go from, it's a good question. The way I like to write is by involving myself in as much research as humanly possible. I'm sort of a research nerd in that way. I made them hire an assistant for me to help go to the library and do all the microfiche and all that crazy stuff. And I had just piles of Joan stuff about her when she was a kid, and articles, and my nerdy friend, Maggie, who did all that research, and I read all these books, and I was really struck as I was doing the research and reading all about her, this sort of incredible dichotomy between what it was like for a young woman at her age in that time and what she was expected to do with what she wanted to do. And how actually, in some ways, she sort of managed to do both. She really wanted to be a good wife and a good mother, and she also wanted to tell jokes, and those things were very much at odds, especially in that time. So I felt like that struggle really was where it wanted to start.
And so I imagine you went through all different versions of her act throughout the years. I mean, are these all her jokes? Are they some of them yours? How did you
pretty much all anytime she's doing stand-up, it's pretty much her jokes. Something I either found or read, or Melissa put together a book of her mom's stuff, which has these index cards, and on the set there's a sort of card catalog, and I had access to the catalog so I could leaf through her amazing card catalog. And I also...
The actual physical catalog?
Yeah, I mean, I went to it a couple of times and was able to write stuff down. I wasn't able to go to it all the time. I was in their offices in New York. But I also had access to both her assistant Graham, who was here last night, who was her assistant when she died, and also one of her joke writers, a guy named Larry, who I could call him up and ask him, I need a joke about blah, blah, blah. And he would either help me find one, or he would, yeah, she used to do this one about blah, blah, blah. And then sometimes if she's talking just to us, a lot of those I wrote myself.
Well, you wrote a really good one this week. I don't want to spoil it, but it's a local joke about going to Williamstown.
That's not me. I mean, that's actually just Melissa told me that story about.
Is that real? True?
That's real. I did not make that up. Most of it's not made up. Anything that's sort of factual is not made up. But I mean, I made a joke out of it because a white stretch limo in Williamstown, Massachusetts, just tickled my fancy.
What? Are there jokes that you remember that you didn't put in the play that you wish you could have found a place?
Oh, there's countless ones. I mean, the amount of YouTube clips of her doing stand-up on YouTube is just astronomical. It's huge.
Now, I saw the play. It was done first at South Coast Rep in Costa Mesa, and very similar audience to ours. And I was nervous when I saw the show because, the language that she used is still sort of shocking. I don't know if a stand-up today could get away with it, and yet not only did she get away with it, I mean, it's still a little shocking today, and the raunchier or dirtier the language was, the more the audience laughed. And we're finding that here as well, and I just wonder, as you went through the process of it, how do you where's the line with Joan?
There was one joke that, I'm not making this up, this is actually what she did, but we were doing the part on the, there was only one joke that we cut because it was just too much.
Are you going to tell it?
Yeah. It was when she's on the red carpet with Melissa and she's talking to the camera and she says, welcome to right now she says, welcome to the Golden Globies, what up my people? And she sort of does like a rap voice, like, the girl dizzle, grow bizzle at the for shizzle, like that kind of thing. But there was one, and she did that one too. But another one that she did, she said, welcome to the Golden Globes, or as our friends in China call it, the Golden Grobies. And we read it, and I thought it was so funny. And we read it, and our cast went, oh, no. That's just, it's just too much. Like, there's some things that, and at first Melissa was very, very worried about modern audiences and how they were going to respond to it. And as the play went on, and as she did this special that she produced, she sort of felt like, oh, that's what we want from Joan. We want and she got more and more. She didn't swear in the early stages. She didn't. she wasn't as, she talked about things that she wasn't allowed to talk to about. She talked about what it was like to be married and what it was like to be a housewife and sex and all of that stuff, but she didn't, it wasn't dirty.
She couldn't. I mean, I guess she could at the club, not on
Right,
TV.
but she didn't. And then as time went on, she got more and more carefree about it. Kind of amazing.
Tell me more about, I mean, for those of you in the audience that might not know her origin story and the beginning of her life, especially the years in Greenwich Village. And, you know, I was stunned to know the people she was hanging out with and who her contemporaries were, and a little bit about that.
We mentioned it a little bit in the play because I just thought it was fascinating, but she knew Lenny Bruce, she knew Woody Allen, she knew George Carlin, she knew all of those guys as they were all, you know, going around to all the clubs in the village. And same with the, you know, it would be one of them doing comedy, and then Bob Dylan would come up and play the guitar, and Joan Baez, and it was all in the same era where the coffee shops and the cafes were really vibrant. I can't imagine what it would have been like at that time.
It makes me think, just for you and I, there's a play that she did later on about Lenny Bruce's mother that she kept trying to revive, and I have to get my hands on a copy of
Sally Marr.
Sally, yeah.
Yeah, and she wrote it too. I think she wrote it. Yeah. I never saw it, but it was her. She got nominated for a Tony for it.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that's not in the play that I really, or it's in the play a very little bit, but I wish there were more of it, is she really, she always thought of herself as an actress.
Yeah.
And apparently she took over in, do you guys know the play Broadway Bound?
Yeah.
The third of the Brighton Beach Memoirs, Neil Simon trilogy. She took over in that play in the run, and apparently she was, Manny Eisenberg, famous producer, and thought she was extraordinary in it, maybe even better than the originating actress.
Well, then the thing that I loved that she said in an interview was she couldn't sing, but she had such a personality that Hal Prince said, if only you could have sung, you would have been the next Ethel Merman. You would have been that, you know, kind of huge musical theater personality. What is it like to work with Melissa on this piece, or what's the working relationship there?
It took a moment. I mean, Melissa is, you know, imagine being a woman who worked with her mother for the majority of her professional career and chose to do that. I mean, she really did have a sort of burgeoning, she went to University of Pennsylvania, she's a really smart woman. She had a burgeoning journalistic career, and she chose to go into business with her mom and made it her life. And then, you know, her mom died, and her responsibility after that is to really take care of her mom's legacy. Because, you know, Melissa's really smart and interesting on her own, but she's still Melissa Rivers. I mean, her given name is Melissa Rosenberg, but she took the name Melissa Rivers. And so she's not defensive, but she has a wall. She is very careful about who she lets in. And as the writing process went on, you know, I tried at first to interview her. I really love to write based on interviews. I feel like there's something that's really exciting that happens because people talk in a way that you don't get on paper if it's written. And she just, it was sort of worthless a little bit because she was not willing to or interested in being real with me. I felt like I was at the other end of a talk show. It felt like very pat, sort of practiced answers. And as time went on, she got much more open and much more trusting, and she loves the play and loves working with me and the director David Ivers, and we've gotten very close and we text. She's in Wyoming right now on a retreat that she does every year, and she just got married, and her husband fractured his collarbone falling off a horse. She said it wasn't even during the fun part, they were just walking. And she said, I'm doing this text-to-speech, so at least my phone has finally figured out the difference between ducking and fucking, which I thought was really great. But like that's the kind of relationship that Melissa and I have at this point. And she really loves the play and loves the story we're telling. And as time has gone on, she's gotten much more intimate in terms of details. And that's where that stuff about Williamstown came in, and the stuff about the hotel soap, like that her parents were desperate about stealing stuff from hotels. You know, she always grew up, as a lot of children of immigrants do, worrying that the money would be gone, always. And so, you know, there's a line in the play, but Melissa really said, like, I didn't know that soap came in other sizes. You know, and so I think that she's gotten much more intimate. And in fact, this past May, we did a workshop that she came to in California. And she told us about what it was like to lose her house. Her house burned down in the fires, the recent fires in Los Angeles, and I asked her what she took with her when she left, and that's now in the play.
Well, if you can remember, what is a great note or piece of feedback she gave you about the writing in the process?
You know, she was very concerned always about making sure that her father, who had a lot of faults, was seen nobly. She was really concerned always about Edgar's portrayal. I don't want to spoil it for any of you, but it's not a happy ending for Edgar. So I think making sure that he never seemed to just be a loser, because he really was an extraordinary guy, and I think put in some terrible circumstances.
Well, I've been thinking about that a lot, because has anyone read Barry Dillard's new book or seen interviews with him? I mean, he was the cause of the firing, and he seems so nice. And what he did was so cutthroat in life that I'm eager to actually read the book and see.
It's also very interesting to think about what that was. I think that Edgar, as a producer, didn't know how to play in someone else's sandbox. And he saw himself as sort of the bulldog to defend Joan. And in some ways, he needed to be on their team, not as much as hers. And therefore, some of the guilt that she feels is that she knew he was just trying to do his best for her.
Yeah. What are the misconceptions about Joan that you think people walking into the play might have? Or what were yours walking into this process?
I didn't know as much as I do now about her early life. I mean, about where she came from and what sort of her role was, and also the real struggle that she had to get to where she was. And obviously, if this were a TV miniseries as opposed to a 100-minute play, there would be a lot more time spent in those early years. Just how hard it was, and how hard she worked, how hard any comic works to make what seems easy and like a throwaway work incredibly well with an audience. She makes what seems, and it's all practiced, and it's exactly as she wanted it, and the phrasing of it and the timing of it.
Yeah, I love, there's a scene early in the play with an older comic who's giving her advice, and it took me so much. I know that Mrs. Maisel's not a direct pull from Joan, even though it really
kind of is.
It is, and
they just don't get the rights.
Exactly. But I love that sense of how a comic gets good at what they do and the unseen work. I mean, and you bring that into the play, because she talks about that she had said those lines on the Carson show so many times that she was prepared. And I've seen the videos of her with her note cards and the jokes. And has anyone here seen the documentary Joan Rivers, A Piece of Work? Yeah, if you haven't, it's amazing. And there are these scenes where she's just trying out.
Yeah, she tried out a lot of material, and I think, the scene with the comic was really inspired actually by a really excellent book about stand-up comedy that I recommend for everybody in terms of, I give it to people who are starting careers in the arts, and especially in performing. Steve Martin's book about his early years called Still Standing, I think is what it's called.
I haven't read it.
What is it called?
Born Standing
Born
Up.
Standing.
Born Standing Up.
Born Standing Up. It's extraordinary. It's really, really exceptional. It sort of ends when he gets famous. But it is about the rigor it takes to do something genuinely stupid. And I had a friend, do you guys know there's a very famous school in Paris called École Jacques Lecoq. And Jacques Lecoq was the most famous clown, mime, comedy person, but they take the school very seriously. It's really cutthroat to get in, and every year, at the end of the year, you walk up these stairs to the offices, and one by one, and you get up to the top, and you go into the offices, and they basically tell you if you're welcome to come back the following year, and about a third of the class gets cut. And I visited a friend of mine who was in school there, who I went to college with, who sort of did a grad program there for a few years. And the classes are all held in French, so if you don't speak French, you're sort of
Ducks.
Yeah, you just have to figure it out. And well played, that's a callback. That's what they call a callback in comedy. And the highest compliment that you could get in a class at Lecoq was stupid. Like if it was something was really stupid, you knew that it was like elegantly done and perfect. And I think that that means something. That means that you've worked hard at it. And I think what Joan did to make it seem like she was always all flustered and trying to figure out, and always sort of out of sorts and like, just put out, she really, it was rehearsed, it was practiced. She would have her sort of notes on giant pieces of paper on the floor as she was learning her routine so she could sort of go from one to the next. She was incredible that way.
You don't touch about this a lot in the play, but I've been thinking about it. I mean, everyone says Joan and they say plastic surgery. And I was thinking about the comics that came before her, like Phyllis Diller, who made a point of making herself look less attractive to be funny. And Joan was the opposite. She worked so hard to feel attractive, and that seemed to be at odds with what happened on stage. And I just wonder what your perspective is on that aspect of her.
I only sort of make jokes about her plastic surgery. I think there's, again, it's one of those things that I think in a larger context could be uncovered, but I think she always felt like the ugly duckling. Her sister was much prettier, always had boys, and she really didn't. She always felt fat, she always felt flat-chested, she always felt ugly. So I think as she got older and had the means to do it, she wanted to make herself into the woman that she always wanted to be. I think she was very concerned with being thin. I think she gave Melissa a lot of complexes about that as well. There's a lot of stuff about Joan that I did not include in the play because it's a play that was commissioned by her daughter. Joan was also a Republican, and was, I don't know if she would be now, but she was very fiscally conservative, but sort of liberal in her. So, in the Reagan days, she was very much behind AIDS support, but a lot of people criticized her because Reagan was so terrible with AIDS research at the time. So there's a lot of that back and forth that are sort of these paradigms with Joan that in this context I wasn't really able to explore. I mean, I used to mention it in the play and then I cut it because Melissa didn't love it, but if you really want to have fun, like, get kind of drunk and go on YouTube and look up, I can't remember what it's called, but if you look up Joan and Melissa TV movie.
Oh, the TV movie they made about...
They made a TV movie
about the suicide.
After Edgar died, about the suicide, where they played themselves. So like the opening scene is like Melissa in bed and the phone rings and she answers the phone. It's so cheesy and so terrible, and it does include the most famous line. And they're also very bad actors at acting as themselves. It sort of seems antithetical to what it would be, but like they're very bad at playing themselves. But Joan says to Melissa in one very heated exchange, "You didn't kill Daddy. I didn't kill Daddy. Daddy killed Daddy." It's very cheesy.
But listen, I mean, well, it tells you something quite fascinating that the way they chose to get over the grief was to make a movie about.
But there was also a good check involved.
Well, it was, so what do you think? I mean,
When he died, they were in terrible finances. They had spent way more money than they ever had. And that's another thing I sort of don't really go into in the play, but they were, that's why she sort of went into all the QVC stuff. She needed to make money. She had a big overhead.
how do you, so you're working with two actresses, the Eleanor plays young Joan, and then Melissa, and then Tessa plays Joan's mother, and then the Joan that we're more familiar with. You didn't direct the piece, but you're writing with these two living actors. And you know, one thing I'm fascinated by is, I mean, how do you go about doing that so that it's not just an imitation? It's helping them find the spirit of that. What was that process like with you and with David Ivers, who did direct the piece?
I think in terms of Joan, I put a big note at the beginning of the play that I never wanted it to turn into drag.
Yeah.
I think there's a version of the play where you get, basically, whether it's a man or a woman, you get a drag performer on stage sort of doing Joan. And I never wanted that. I wanted to get the essence of it because though we do have the jokes and we do have the comedy, it's a real play. We're really exploring the darker sides of her time. So we always encouraged a sense of the rhythm of it and the sense of how she talks, because it is that. But you know, the paradigm for me in my brain, I don't know if this is too deep a cut, but the Oliver Stone movie about Nixon, Anthony Hopkins played Nixon, but he didn't really do a whole lot of makeup. And he just sort of became Nixon. It's why I wade into this one, but like it's why I sort of hated Bradley Cooper in Maestro, because he didn't need to do all that stuff.
Careful, that's the Berkshire audience.
Well, you know, I think Bernstein was amazing, and I think if Bradley Cooper was going to play him, he could have just played him. He didn't need a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And so it felt like for Tessa, the wig does enough. We get the rhythms, we get the flavor of it. It's theater, just like Richard III in a play didn't really have a hump. It's Shakespeare's histories. We can, that's our job as audience members in the theater. We're not making a movie. If you're making a movie, it's a little bit different. But like, I think we have to be able to suspend some sense of verisimilitude in order to attach our imaginations to the creation of character.
And is that, I mean, did you always know you divide young Joan?
No, it was originally going to be one person, and then A, it became impossible, and B, it seemed, I didn't want the younger person to be playing Mrs. Malinsky, so it's sort of, but it was not part of the original concept. The original was one person, but it just felt stupid, and just impossible for one human being to do. And I really think because I think that what we're dealing with is sort of generational trauma. Mrs. Malinsky says things to Joan that Joan then says to Melissa exactly verbatim. And I think that some of that casting is part of what makes it delightful.
Tessa, I think they're both so good. I love what Tessa does. So the part of Joan I know more. How did Melissa work with her? What was that like for the Tessa and Melissa together to kind of?
Melissa was very, she never said, do it like this. Yeah. Or she just said, we had questions about what her grandparents talk like, because obviously there's no audio of them.
Did she know them?
Oh yeah, she did. And her dad, because there's almost zero footage of Edgar speaking. But he sort of had this German /English/something accent, so that stuff was very helpful.
Let me ask you a question that just interests me, being a Jewish theater person and you as well. And it's a deeply Jewish play without it ever saying that it is, because her experience and her parents, I mean, was, as you mentioned earlier, a classic immigrant experience. And I know that was part of her life as well. And
very much so. I think the idea of moving to Larchmont, I mean, having grown up in Larchmont, having gone to the yacht club, the Larchmont Yacht Club, which is restricted, with a friend when I was in 6th grade, and I remember, like, it was my first experience of like, oh, Jew, when I signed in, and the guy behind the desk went, Goldstein, and looked at my friend like, what are you doing? Like, I just remember that moment. And, you know, Larchmont's much more. There's a temple, and the conservative temple is gone, but there's a temple in town. There are Jews there, but it's still a pretty goyish town. But, like, so is the world.
What do you...
I think the thing about Judaism that comes into it, I think, is the immigrant experience. The experience of every Jew always thinks like, is this it? Is this the moment? Is it happening? Always, every minute of every day. At some point, you're going to do that. I just think that's part of it. And so that sense of Joan sort of always wanting to make sure, I do this all the time. I'm like, I have a day off. I'm like, what could I be doing? How could I earn $1? So, you know, that's sort of how
Here you are today.
Yeah, raking it in at Barrington Stage.
Oh, when you put it that way. No. But before we open it up to questions, I'm just curious, what do you want an audience to take from this particular play now, this summer?
I would like audiences to have a good time hearing a story that they might know some of. Even Graham, who was Joan's assistant last night, said, you know, there's parts of the story that I
couldn't believe
I didn't know about, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, he was with her when she died, or not in the room, but he was working for her at that time. So I thought that was really interesting. But to sort of take an icon and dig in a little deeper and make her more human, I think that is really something that biographical material should do, and hopefully you get a couple new vagina jokes to tell your friends.
Well, and it's interesting, you know, I don't know everyone that comes to the shows, but I see people that come regularly to the shows, and it's obviously those people have been here, but there have been a lot of people that I think are just Pittsfield people and local people that are coming to the play just on the name recognition alone, which has been interesting for me, and I think will only continue to happen for the next few weeks as we play it.
It was really fun to watch the interns and the summer college students who were working on the show during our designer runs in the rehearsal room, and during parts of the play where things happened that they couldn't believe. They just sort of went. But Melissa's a person who's experienced an enormous amount of loss in her life. Like just you know, there's a line in the end of the play that that's my new favorite line in the play where Melissa's telling her all this stuff, and Joan says, the woke would say you've experienced trauma. And I think, you know, Joan, like experiencing Joan in this day and age, as you know, as opposed to when she died 10 years ago, she really missed all the fun.
Well, let's take a moment to open it up for some audience questions. We have Maura, who's back there with a microphone. But maybe if you could raise your hand if you want to ask something, and we'll. Yes.
A number of years ago, early in Joan's career, she appeared in a movie with Burt Lancaster called The Swimmer. Did she do other films, and did she have any aspirations to be in Hollywood film?
She did a little bit. She also did a film called Rabbit Test, or she wrote a film called Rabbit Test that Billy Crystal was in. Like Rabbit Test, like the old pregnancy tests. But it sort of never occurred, it never happened the same way. That movie's terrific. It's based on that John Cheever story. Yeah, she like I said, she wanted to be an actor, but it sort of never really came. No one really took her seriously as an actress. And I think part of it is it took until much later in her career when she did Broadway Bound on Broadway that she was able to sort of just not do Joan Rivers. as she has this persona, as she made up this sort of person, because she wasn't like that in real life. Or she wasn't entirely like that in real life all the time. It was hard for her to lose that on stage, to have the confidence, her own ability to lose herself in a role like that. So it never really happened. It's a shame, because I think it would have been, I think had she, had her whole career shifted about 20 years later, I think it would have happened more, because the film industry and all of that kind of thing would have been more, there would have been some indie movie that she would have done and won an Oscar for, because she was so good.
And I always wanted to, I mean, not that I could really do this, but cast her as Dolly Levi and Thornton Wilder as the matchmaker.
She would have been extraordinary.
I just think it would have been extraordinary.
The Matchmaker's such a good play.
I wish we could do it here. There's some questions on this side.
Yeah.
Hi.
Oh,
First,
You got
I want to thank you both for keeping Joan's legacy alive. There was no one like her, and I think that's so important. I wondered, several years ago, a biography was written called Last Girl on the Freeway, I think by Leslie Bennett.
Yeah.
Melissa cooperated with that initially and then changed her mind because it was going in different directions. Did any of that book have any bearing on the biography of what you're doing now?
I definitely read the book, and I definitely heard about the parts that Melissa didn't care for. It was a good overview for me to get all of the timeline in one place, and then I took that as a springboard to find material that Melissa said was more accurate. Now, you know, it's also Melissa, and it's also her mom, and so I tried to be, especially about the Johnny Carson stuff and how much her dad had to do with it. There's a lot of varying, and no one will ever know how that happened. What she really doesn't, Melissa really didn't, that book portrays the end of the Tonight Show into that as the Tonight Show people sort of playing Edgar for a sap to get her off the show. And I'm not sure how much I believe of that either. But that book really dives into that sort of conspiracy, and Melissa says it's crap. And I don't know. I tend to trust her. She's really smart, and I feel like she is somewhat objective. So, but as a book, it's a terrific. It's an entertaining read, and it gives a really good sense of her overall. That's where a lot of the early stuff about Jimmy Sanger, her first husband, that was annulled, that came from. There was more of that, obviously, but just the play was going to be a million years long.
Being a dog lover, I know she bequeathed, in addition to the money, 4 rescue dogs. And she died like 11 years ago. Anything about those dogs? Are they still around?
You know, I don't know where the dogs are now. There was a moment where I was going to put in stuff about dogs in the play, but again, dogs are very expensive to put into a play. Yes, I didn't. But yeah, she loved her dogs. They're these tiny little ones. But I don't know where they are now. If they're still around, or if they had kids. You know, Barbra Streisand was really into her dogs. She had them cloned. She had her dogs cloned for like $1 million. I mean, she paid so much money for them. Did you guys read? I mean, I'd like to write that play. Did you read that book? Her book?
Yeah.
Did you? You know what's the best thing to do? Listen to it.
I listened to it.
It's 48 hours of audiobook. It's extraordinary. And she like goes off on tangents.
Yeah.
She's like reading the page, and she goes, "Oh, that was funny." Blah 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 blah. And she starts talking.
Yeah, she was not satisfied. She's made stuff up.
Yeah, no, I was doing a play. I was doing a show in Japan, and I had about an hour commute to the rehearsal room each way. So I would listen to it on the streets of Japan. It was a very disorienting experience, but boy, was that a terrific book.
Hi. First, I want to start off by saying I'm Jewish and I grew up in New Rochelle.
Ah.
And every time we would drive on Weaver Street past, I think it was the Bonnie Bray Country
Bonnie
Club.
Breyer.
Bonnie Breyer.
It's mentioned in the play.
Oh, really? Because somebody in my family would say, "Oh, it's restricted."
It's restricted. Always. The Jews went to the Catholics went to the yacht club. The Jews went to the shore club. Like, it was all, it's just, and it's still the same.
Yeah.
I mean, they say it's not, but it's still the same.
Mm-hmm.
And there are no black people anywhere. So like, it's just mind-boggling to me.
Well, in New Rochelle High School, where I went, they used to say the blacks and Italians fought and the Jews sold tickets.
Yeah, it's really, New Rochelle High School is the prettiest high school building,
Yeah.
like in New York State. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it is.
It's in, Bonnie Breyer is mentioned in the play.
It's funny. So, and I used to go to Walters.
I still go to
There's
Walters
no
all
better
the
hot
time.
dog. So actually, my question is, I know that Joan had a grandson, and I believe they had a very affectionate relationship from what I recall. So I'm just wondering whether he's seen the show and what his reaction has been to it.
Melissa, did he come see the play? He couldn't come to opening in LA. He's now he's relatively new out of school, and he is working his tail off. The family works hard, so I think he couldn't come to the play in California, but I think he's read it. But he couldn't come to the opening with Melissa. But yeah, we definitely mentioned him, and there used to be more. There used to be a part where she said, "Oh yeah, and my grandson has the best name for me. I'm known as Nana Newface." That was so funny, but again.
My favorite thing is in an interview about him, it's not in the play, the interviewer says, "What is your hope and dream for your grandson?" And she said that he'd be gay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think he
premature, but do you have any inkling of it going on to off-Broadway or Broadway yet?
That is a question for our producer, Mike Mills. I know he has other plans for it, because I think he'd like to make back the money he's invested in the play so far. And we've had a production at South Coast. We have this production. He's licensed the play to the Cape Playhouse, which will have a production that opens in September. That is a totally different director, the designers, actors, all different. So it'll be interesting to see that. I think he would like to have a future life, but I don't know yet what it's going to be.
About her years at Barnard, do you know anything about them? I was very impressed that she went to Barnard and that she ended up doing this for a career.
Yeah.
What did she study?
It's been a minute since I did all the research. It was a part of the play that I left out because not much happened there that affected what she did career-wise, but I think she sort of went to Barnard and was a good student and went downtown to watch a lot of comedy. But I honestly I couldn't tell you that much more. Someone asked me about this yesterday. I don't remember, is my honest to God answer to your question. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah.
Something that you said about when Joan Rivers wasn't Joan Rivers reminded me. I was seeing a North Broadway show and she was in the audience, and I went over to her because my mother always told me this. She grew up in East New York, Brooklyn, and she said they never had any money, but a doctor came to their house, and because they couldn't pay the doctor, they paid him in seltzer. And I went over to Joan Rivers, and of course she had all the people around her, but I mean, I didn't have a pen, and I'd want her autograph, and I told her the story. And when I said they paid her father in seltzer because they had no money, she wasn't Joan Rivers. You saw that different look on her face.
Yeah. She really had, she had a very deep family connection, and I think what her father did and what they moved to Larchmont to try to give their kids a better life, I think, and that's what happened. I mean, I was born in Flushing, and my parents moved to Larchmont when I was 2. So I think that was the whole point. Yeah, she was incredible that way. Yes.
I have a question concerning her gay audience.
Yes.
What do you think the gay audience appreciated her to the extent that they did?
Well, I think in some ways it was because she appreciated them. I think they really liked how ribald her jokes were. But I'm not gay, so I'm gonna.
So you're looking at me.
I'm gonna look to Alan. I don't mean to out you.
I
Surprise!
surprise.
But do you have a sense of that? Because I don't really have a great answer to
The
that
gays
question.
love an underdog. You know, that's why they love Judy Garland.
Yeah.
And she was unusual. She was an outcast, and I think people saw themselves in her. And I think forgetting the gay side of me, well, that's probably the only side. I'm still shocked that she tells the truth. In an interview, someone said, "What is your persona?" And she said, "I'm like the neighbor who says what you're thinking, but you're afraid to say." And I think especially in these times that people are so afraid for consequences for just saying what they really feel, I think audiences this week have been refreshed to, I mean, when she says the C word, it's like nothing apologetic about the audience response. I think they're relieved, and I think there's just something, I was thinking about her actually thinking, because the special happened a few weeks ago, who out there has taken her place in the 11 years since she died, 10 years, and there's no other comic like her out there, because I love Kathy Griffin, but Kathy Griffin isn't a truth teller, and I think Joan just told the truth in a way that no one else did, and that's...
I used to have a joke in there about Kathy Griffin, and I cut it.
Yeah.
It was like, because she just sort of felt like Kathy Griffin was stealing her act.
Yeah, but not at all.
Not at all.
Yeah, but I'm sorry to only half answer your question.
No, I think, I also would say that the sort of fantasticness of her and the grandness of her.
Well, yeah, the other thing I loved in an interview, she said that she always dressed, and there was a line between designer clothes and clothes for the hookers. And she'd go on 8th Avenue in the 30s in the garment district and buy a lot of things. But she also said, you're only going to meet me once in your lifetime, so I better look good, because what you're going to ask your friends is, was she nice and what was she wearing?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Any last questions? It's hard to see out there. Maura?
We haven't seen the play yet, we'll see it later on. And I don't know if you included this, but in the documentary that you mentioned, my recollection is it begins with her looking at her appointment book. And she sees that, she's got all these appointments on the calendar, and then she says, wait a minute, that Wednesday, 2 weeks from now, I'm not doing anything. Fill that in, get something there. And it immediately gives you in the documentary an idea of her compulsion, her earnestness of trying to always be busy, always be doing something. Did you incorporate that in the play?
Yes, it is in the play, that sense of desire. She in that actual scene, she says, look at it, it's so bare, you need to, the appointments look so bare, you need to put sunglasses on to look at it. And that's in the play. Because that was her deepest fear, was not being wanted, not being seen. And the documentary is focused on a very specific point in her life when she sort of was out of fashion for a moment, and QVC was part of it, and the thing that really put her back in the spotlight was actually, God forbid, the Apprentice. Mm-hmm. And that really helped her come back, so
I don't think she won.
At least he's done one good thing. We've really had such a wonderful time making this play. To get to come into a room and just laugh so much and tell stories that are so meaningful from a lot of people wondered why I wrote this play, and I think as a kid from Larchmont who wants to have a family and wants to have a career in the arts, it's always a bit of a struggle, and it's been very interesting for me and heartening to see Joan's career in that way. So
I think that's a great note to end it on. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all so much.